What if I told you that hidden in the shadows of history lies a book so powerful it could rewrite your destiny? A book so secret, so forbidden, that even the richest and most powerful people would risk everything to get their hands on it. Today, we're cracking open Nixarus's secret book, a formula written centuries ago that claims to unlock unlimited power and unimaginable wealth. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear could change everything you thought you knew about money and power. The story of Nixarus's secret book begins in an era when kingdoms rose and fell overnight, not through armies or battles, but through knowledge so profound that it could bend fate itself. Legends whisper that the book was crafted by Nixarus, a philosopher-king who transcended ordinary understanding of wealth and influence. Unlike modern manuals that talk about strategies or investments, this book speaks to a level beyond money, tapping directly into the patterns of power itself. Those who claim to have glimpsed its pages describe it not as ink on paper, but as a living guide, capable of revealing truths only when the reader is ready. From the very first chapter, the book challenges your perception of value. It doesn't merely explain how to accumulate money, it reframes money as a tool, a reflection of energy, and a byproduct of influence and human psychology. Nixarus insists that power without understanding is hollow, and wealth without intention is fleeting. He uses parables, encoded examples, designed to test the reader's patience, perception, and mental flexibility. Every sentence seems simple, but beneath the surface, there's a labyrinth of meaning. As you progress deeper, Nixarus introduces the concept of resonant energy. He claims that wealth and power are not solely external. They are attracted by the inner alignment of one's thoughts, beliefs, and actions. This is not metaphysics for the weak-minded. It is a precise observation of human behavior, timing, and action. The book suggests that a person aligned with this energy moves through life like water through a riverbed, unopposed, flowing around obstacles, naturally attracting opportunities. Imagine understanding the precise moment to act in business, negotiations, or personal influence, almost as if the world conspires to open doors in your favor. Yet the book is not just theory. Nixarus provides structured exercises, seemingly simple at first, but with layers that reveal themselves only when practiced consistently. One exercise involves observing interactions without judgment, recording how influence manifests in daily life, and recognizing patterns that most people overlook. He insists that without observation, knowledge is sterile. Power, according to him, is a living system, like a plant. You cannot command it, you must cultivate it. By doing so, the reader begins to see how subtle cues, timing, and perception control outcomes in ways most dismiss as luck. The next section delves into wealth creation, but not in the way you might expect. Nixarus describes 3 distinct levels of wealth: the tangible, the relational, and the legacy wealth. Tangible wealth is obvious: money, assets, possessions. Relational wealth is the network of trust, influence, and reputation one builds. Legacy wealth is rarer. It's the impact you leave, the systems and structures you create that generate value long after your presence. He emphasizes that ignoring any one of these dimensions leads to imbalance. People chase money but neglect influence, and influence without tangible resources is empty. The book shows how all 3 must flow in harmony, and it provides cryptic but actionable techniques to harmonize them. Among the most controversial teachings is Nixarus's discussion of leverage, something he treats almost as an art form. He breaks it down into unseen forces: emotional, social, and informational leverage. Emotional leverage means understanding desires and fears of those around you and subtly guiding their decisions. Social leverage involves the strategic alignment of alliances, relationships, and reputation. Informational leverage is the control of knowledge itself, knowing when to reveal, when to withhold, and when to act. When combined, these forces are said to multiply outcomes exponentially. The book warns that misuse of leverage leads to collapse, but mastery creates results that appear almost magical. One of the most fascinating aspects is the emphasis on timing and patience. Nixarus doesn't glorify hustle or constant action. Instead, he stresses observing cycles, waiting for the exact moment when conditions are favorable, and acting decisively. The book recounts historical examples of rulers, traders, and sages who waited silently for years before making moves that changed everything. This patience is framed not as passivity, but as an active intelligence, understanding the flow of events and positioning oneself where power naturally gravitates. Even the language of the book is a study in itself. Nixarus often repeats concepts in seemingly different contexts, forcing the reader to notice patterns rather than memorize advice. These repetitions act as mental triggers, training the mind to recognize opportunities and threats without conscious effort. He encourages the reader to internalize principles until they become instinct, like muscle memory. The deeper the reader engages, the more the book transforms from instruction into intuition, creating a feedback loop where learning itself amplifies influence. Nixarus also introduces a method called the circle of exchange. At first, it sounds simple, exchange value with others, but the nuance is in how value is perceived, created, and reciprocated. He explains that genuine power comes from being a node in multiple overlapping networks of exchange, where influence flows freely, but only those attuned can detect the patterns. This requires empathy, strategy, and observation, all practiced with subtlety. The text implies that anyone can amass money, but few can command respect and obedience simultaneously. Perhaps the most striking feature is the book's insistence that power and money are inseparable from ethics, or at least alignment with natural laws. Nixarus warns repeatedly that ignoring consequences, exploiting recklessly, or acting out of ego invites collapse. He frames these as not moral imperatives, but as universal feedback mechanisms. Misuse energy, and it rebounds, often magnified. The book encourages rigorous self-assessment, reflection, and incremental growth. He suggests that small misalignments compound over time, while consistency in principles yields results that seem disproportionate to effort. By the time the first sections are digested, the reader begins to notice a profound shift. Ordinary interactions, meetings, negotiations, friendships, start revealing underlying patterns. Nixarus emphasizes that mastery is not flashy or loud. It is quiet, deliberate, and often invisible. True power, he claims, is hidden in the decisions no one else notices, in the preparation done before others even realize a contest exists. Money follows naturally, but it is secondary, a reflection of alignment, strategy, and influence, rather than the end goal itself. As you delve further into Nixorus' work, the focus shifts from observation to deliberate action, but always tempered with precision. He introduces what he calls the alignment principle, a concept that binds intention, environment, and timing together. According to him, most people fail not because they lack resources or ideas, but because their internal state is misaligned with their goals. The book teaches methods to recalibrate mental, emotional, and physical energy so that decisions flow effortlessly and opportunities present themselves almost naturally. He writes that when alignment occurs, the world seems to bend in your favor, not by magic, but through consistent, deliberate resonance with surrounding forces. Nixarus then dives into the architecture of influence. He distinguishes between superficial charisma and structural influence. Charisma draws attention temporarily. Structural influence creates lasting networks where decisions and resources move according to subtle, unseen currents. He provides exercises to identify leverage points in social, political, and economic systems, often illustrating them with parables of traders who transformed single markets or advisors who reshaped entire kingdoms without ever claiming authority. The reader learns to detect invisible threads, the people, knowledge, and circumstances that, when manipulated wisely, yield results far beyond visible effort. Next, he introduces a concept called the mirror strategy. Here, the book explains that power is often reflected back from others' perceptions. By understanding and strategically reflecting the desires, fears, and ambitions of those around you, you can cultivate influence while appearing neutral or even passive. The principle is deceptively simple. People unconsciously project their expectations, and by responding in alignment with those projections, one can guide outcomes subtly. Nixarus emphasizes that this is not manipulation in a crude sense, but a sophisticated calibration of perception to reality. creating situations where others act in ways that serve mutual benefit, or in more competitive settings, your objectives. He also dedicates extensive sections to the management of knowledge. Nixarus asserts that knowledge without context is dangerous. One must discern which information to store, act upon, or release. He teaches what he calls the three-layer knowledge model. The first layer is common knowledge accessible to anyone. The second is strategic knowledge understood by few. And the third is secret knowledge, often lost in time or intentionally concealed. The book suggests that mastery lies in navigating all three layers simultaneously, applying what is needed at the right time while maintaining secrecy to preserve leverage. Historical anecdotes reinforce this, showing how rulers or merchants who controlled knowledge networks consistently outperform competitors. The concept of wealth creation evolves further in these sections. Nixorus introduces value multipliers, methods to convert ordinary resources into exponential outcomes. These are not shortcuts. They rely on understanding the psychology of exchange, perception of scarcity, and creation of perceived need. For example, a seemingly mundane commodity can be transformed into something highly desirable by aligning it with human desire, timing, and perception. The principle works in small-scale trades and vast economic systems alike. Nixarus insists that understanding human attention and belief is more powerful than mere accumulation of material goods, because attention converts into influence, and influence converts into tangible outcomes. Another striking lesson is the law of invisible networks. According to Nixarus, power rarely flows linearly. Instead, it exists in interwoven networks, where every person, resource, or idea is a node connected to countless others. Those who understand these networks can influence outcomes indirectly by nudging a single node, causing a cascade of effects. The book provides practical ways to map these networks, understand weak points, and exploit them ethically or strategically, depending on circumstances. In essence, this teaches readers that overt effort is rarely as effective as subtle, strategic intervention. The next layer of mastery concerns risk and perception. Nixarus teaches that the appearance of control often outweighs actual control. A leader who seems composed, decisive, and informed, even when uncertain, naturally attracts trust and obedience. He illustrates this with stories of generals and merchants who survived catastrophes not through brute force, but by cultivating perceptions that made allies confident and adversaries hesitant. The book provides exercises for enhancing composure, projecting certainty, and managing the signals you send in every interaction, whether business, negotiation, or social maneuvering. Interestingly, Nixorus doesn't ignore the role of failure. He frames failure as information, an essential component of wealth and power cultivation. Every misstep reveals a hidden variable, a misunderstood dynamic, or an unseen leverage point. The book encourages systematic reflection, recording failures meticulously, and analyzing them for patterns that can be leveraged in the future. Over time, these failures accumulate into a personal map of influence and opportunity, giving the reader a predictive edge that few others possess. He then discusses the principle of reciprocal advantage, a sophisticated approach to negotiation and alliances. Unlike simple quid pro quo systems, this principle focuses on creating layered, asymmetrical advantages that appear mutually beneficial. For instance, giving value to a partner in a way that strengthens your long-term position without immediate cost. The book includes detailed mental exercises to train intuition for when and how to extend favors, accept offers, and structure deals that maximize outcomes over time. These are often illustrated with historical scenarios where entire empires' fates turned on subtle exchanges of influence. The book's psychological insights deepen further with a section on cognitive framing for power. Nixarus explains that how problems and opportunities are framed mentally determines the range of possible outcomes. A mind trained in cognitive framing can turn obstacles into advantages, constraints into leverage, and scarcity into desire. He provides exercises for restructuring thought patterns, envisioning multiple outcomes, and mentally rehearsing scenarios to ensure clarity under pressure. This is not abstract meditation. It's a tactical system for anticipating human behavior, market movements, and social dynamics before they manifest externally. He also reveals the cycle of compound influence, a framework showing how small, consistent actions magnify over time. Unlike instant gratification methods, this cycle rewards patience, consistency, and strategic amplification. Nixarus illustrates how repeated, small acts of value, reputation building, and strategic alignment snowball into extraordinary power and wealth. He emphasizes the exponential nature of influence. A single well-placed decision can ripple across networks, creating opportunities and returns far larger than the immediate action suggests. By now, the reader starts experiencing a shift in thinking. Ordinary circumstances begin to appear as opportunities, human interactions as a web of influence, and every decision as a node in a larger system. Nixarus consistently reminds the reader that the accumulation of wealth and power is a subtle dance, not a sprint, requiring patience, observation, and tactical execution. Money in this framework becomes less a goal and more a signal of alignment, influence, and mastery of these unseen systems. As the reader progresses, Nixorus emphasizes that knowledge without action is like a sword never drawn, useless and dormant. He introduces a set of secret exercises he calls the trials of resonance. These are designed to test your awareness, patience, and alignment with the principles you've learned so far. Unlike ordinary exercises, these are not about memorization or rote action. They are iterative experiments in perception, forcing the reader to observe subtle patterns in behavior, timing, and opportunity that most people overlook entirely. By consistently practicing these trials, one begins to intuit the invisible rhythms that govern human decision-making and the flow of resources. One trial, for instance, involves identifying a situation where influence seems impossible and subtly shifting it without anyone noticing. Nixarus calls this the shadow shift. The challenge is not brute force, but subtle guidance. You must observe, test, and adjust until the environment itself seems to align with your intent. Historical anecdotes in the book tell of merchants who turned hostile negotiations into alliances by leveraging minute, almost imperceptible psychological cues, and rulers who neutralized threats before they even realized they existed. The lesson is clear. Power grows exponentially in the shadows, unseen by those focused only on surface appearances. The next exercise revolves around energy mapping. Nixarus claims that every person, object, and situation emits a type of energy, patterns of intention, emotion, and opportunity. The reader is instructed to catalog interactions and events in meticulous detail, noting shifts in behavior, unspoken signals, and timing anomalies. Over time, this mapping develops into a predictive skill, almost like seeing the invisible architecture of influence. When applied to business, social dynamics, or negotiations, energy mapping allows one to anticipate moves before others even conceive them, creating a profound advantage in decision-making and wealth accumulation. He also introduces a series of rituals designed to reinforce mental clarity and focus, which he collectively names the rites of preparation. These are not mystical in a supernatural sense, but are disciplined routines that prime the mind for observation, calculation, and strategic action. Some involve meditation-like reflection on past interactions, visualizing outcomes in multi-step sequences, and mentally rehearsing complex scenarios before entering real-world negotiations. These rituals condition the mind to remain calm under pressure and recognize patterns that would otherwise be invisible. Nixarus stresses that repetition is essential. The brain must internalize these patterns so that instinct and strategy become indistinguishable. Moving deeper, the book explores the architecture of influence. Nixarus suggests that true power often lies not in direct control, but in creating systems and structures that guide outcomes automatically. He gives examples of economic, social, and political systems designed to produce desired results over time. For instance, an individual might create a chain of small incentives, alliances, and strategic placements that eventually generate wealth or influence without requiring constant intervention. It's like planting seeds whose growth will naturally yield the desired harvest, a mastery of indirect action. One of the most compelling sections introduces temporal leverage. Time, Nixarus explains, is one of the most overlooked tools in wealth and power creation. He describes methods to manipulate perception of urgency, patience, and momentum. By creating situations where others act prematurely or too late, one can gain control without confrontation. Historical illustrations include generals who defeated armies through patience and timing, traders who bought assets before bubbles formed, and leaders who waited years for the exact moment to consolidate power. The principle is simple but underutilized. Timing is more important than speed, and patience is the ultimate form of leverage. He also details advanced negotiation techniques under the term psychological contours. Every interaction, he says, has hidden contours, emotional, cognitive, and social forces that shape decisions. By mapping these contours, one can guide outcomes subtly, often without the other party realizing it. The exercises involve observing micro-reactions, language patterns, and inconsistencies, then applying small nudges that redirect the flow of influence. This skill, according to Nixarus, separates ordinary negotiators from those who wield near unseen authority in markets, politics, and personal networks. Nixarus dedicates a chapter to the alchemy of reputation. He asserts that reputation is not simply earned, but cultivated strategically. Every action, public perception, and network interaction contributes to a compound effect that either elevates or diminishes influence. He provides exercises for amplifying reputation while minimizing exposure to unnecessary risk, such as crafting selective visibility, leveraging endorsements, and subtly signaling competence without arrogance. This is not manipulation in a superficial sense. It is strategic positioning, a careful engineering of perception that draws resources, attention, and opportunities. The book then ventures into risk engineering, a methodology for transforming uncertainty into advantage. Nixorus describes how risk can be mapped, quantified, and leveraged. Instead of avoiding risk, he teaches how to position oneself where others' fear creates opportunity while simultaneously protecting oneself from downside exposure. Case studies include traders who profited from volatility by understanding human behavior, rulers who neutralized threats through indirect measures, and merchants who capitalized on scarcity created by psychological leverage. The principle is that risk is not inherently negative. Mismanaged, yes, but properly understood, it becomes one of the most powerful engines of wealth. Perhaps the most practical and immediately applicable set of teachings revolves around resource multiplication. Unlike conventional advice to invest or save, Nixarus shows how small, carefully structured moves can generate cascading returns. He introduces layered methods for amplifying financial, social, and informational resources simultaneously. For example, a single strategic connection can yield multiple opportunities if leveraged properly across networks. Similarly, knowledge acquired in one domain can be repurposed to unlock hidden advantages in another. These methods are subtle, often invisible to competitors, yet they accumulate into extraordinary results over time. Another critical aspect involves the dynamics of trust. Nixarus asserts that trust is the currency underlying every transaction, negotiation, and alliance. He provides exercises to build, maintain, and strategically leverage trust, often through indirect actions and signaling, rather than overt promises. By mastering trust dynamics, the reader can create influence networks that amplify personal power, attract wealth, and stabilize alliances. Conversely, misuse of trust or overexposure can collapse influence instantly, reinforcing the importance of discretion and alignment. Finally, in this segment, Nixarus introduces the idea of invisible momentum. Once alignment, influence, timing, and strategic positioning are achieved, outcomes begin to manifest with minimal visible effort. Opportunities appear, negotiations resolve favorably, and resources flow naturally. The book describes this as the ultimate goal, a state where power and wealth are no longer actively pursued, but emerge as the natural consequence of mastery. It's the silent, invisible result of years of observation, strategic action, and disciplined practice. As you reach the culmination of Nixarus's secret book, the teachings converge into a single, coherent philosophy. Power and wealth are the natural byproducts of alignment, observation, and strategic action. Nixorus emphasizes that this is not a collection of tricks or shortcuts. It is a disciplined system, honed over centuries, designed to transform ordinary individuals into architects of influence. Every principle, resonant energy, network mapping, temporal leverage, psychological contours, and resource multiplication, forms an interconnected framework. The reader is guided to internalize this framework until it becomes instinctual, a lens through which all decisions, opportunities, and challenges are perceived. He stresses that implementation is the bridge between knowledge and results. One must first cultivate observation skills, gradually move into subtle influence, then layer in strategic interventions that multiply effects across networks. In essence, the book creates a feedback loop. Observation enhances insight, insight refines action, and action compounds influence, producing wealth and power as natural consequences. Nixarus warns against impatience or ego-driven action. The system only works when the practitioner respects timing, subtlety, and alignment with both human behavior and natural cycles. One of the most revolutionary ideas is the integration of legacy strategy. Nixarus asserts that true mastery is not just about personal gain. It's about creating structures that persist beyond individual effort. Legacy strategy involves designing enterprises, networks, and knowledge systems that generate influence and wealth automatically, long after the original architect steps back. He illustrates this with examples of ancient guilds, merchant families, and ruling dynasties who achieved lasting dominance not through brute force, but by embedding principles of power and wealth into enduring structures. The lesson is clear. Personal mastery without legacy is fleeting. The ultimate power lies in creating systems that transcend time. The book also emphasizes continuous adaptation. No system remains static, and neither do human desires, markets, or political landscapes. Nixarus provides methods to recalibrate, anticipate shifts, and remain ahead of trends before they become obvious. This requires disciplined observation, reflection, and subtle experimentation. A constant cycle of learning, testing, and adjusting. The reader is encouraged to maintain detailed records, mental models, and adaptive strategies, ensuring that each decision builds upon accumulated insight rather than relying solely on intuition or luck. In the closing chapters, Nixarus unveils what he calls the principle of compound alignment. Here, all previous teachings converge into a single actionable formula. Align intention with energy, action with timing, influence with networks, and observation with reflection. When each element harmonizes, the results multiply exponentially. Money is no longer a goal, but an indicator of alignment, a reflection of mastery over unseen systems. Power becomes natural, influence automatic, and opportunities appear as if orchestrated by the universe itself. The principle is deceptively simple, but its execution requires patience, practice, and unwavering attention to subtle cues. To translate this into real-world application, Nixarus recommends a phased approach. Begin with observation and recording patterns in everyday interactions, then practice subtle influence exercises. Layer in strategic interventions using temporal and informational leverage. And finally, integrate all actions into long-term systems that perpetuate growth and alignment. By following this phased methodology, the reader gradually transforms from a reactive participant into a proactive architect of outcomes, able to anticipate moves, shape environments, and cultivate wealth and influence with precision. He also underlines the importance of personal discipline and mental clarity. Even the most brilliant strategies fail when distracted by impulses, ego, or inconsistency. Regular mental calibration, reflection, and practice of the rites outlined in the book are essential. These ensure that every action, no matter how small, contributes to the larger framework, and that decisions emerge from mastery rather than chance. In essence, Nixarus teaches that wealth and power are not merely external acquisitions. They are internal achievements, cultivated through deliberate, aligned, and consistent practice. In conclusion, Nixarus's secret book is more than a manual. It is a transformative system, blending psychology, strategy, timing, and human behavior into a unified approach to power and wealth. The insights are timeless, the exercises rigorous, and the results profound. Those who commit to its teachings don't just accumulate money or influence. They become architects of environments where opportunities naturally gravitate toward them, and decisions consistently favor their objectives. And now, if you want to truly master the principles inside Nixarus' secret book, don't just passively watch. Take action. Hit that subscribe button to uncover more hidden strategies that can change the way you think about power and money. If this video gave you insight or sparked curiosity, like it to signal that you want more. Comment below with the insight you found most powerful. Your thoughts might inspire others and even start your journey toward mastery. And finally, share this video with friends who are ready to step into a world of strategy, influence, and wealth. Remember, knowledge alone is useless. Action is what turns secrets into results.